In Luke chapter 12, Jesus tells the parable of the rich fool. I'd like to recite the parable, present the main point of the parable, and then observe two textual details found in the parable. So first, I'll recite the parable. Luke 12, 16 through 21. And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns, build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. Jesus in this story tells about a rich man who is blessed with a rich harvest and spends those riches on himself. God sees this man's choice and declares that he's foolish. I think the main point Jesus is trying to communicate in this parable is it is foolish to invest in oneself and not invest in God. There's a couple textual details that we can observe that help us to see even more what Jesus is trying to communicate. The line that opens up the parable says, and he told them this parable. From this line, we see that the parable is a part of a larger conversation. The verse directly before the parable reads, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. The context shows that Jesus is telling this parable to illustrate that one's life is about more than possessions. The second textual detail that we can note is the descriptors Jesus uses. Jesus uses words to describe the man and his riches like rich, abundant, bigger, surplus, plenty, many. I think the picture Jesus wants us to get is that this man has a ton of earthly possessions. There's one other descriptor that I'd like to take note of, though, from the parable, and that's how God describes the man after he decides to use those riches on himself. God describes the man as a fool. And he describes him this way because he used his life for his own temporary enjoyment and was not rich toward God. So I think both of those textual details help us to see a little bit more clearly that it is foolish to invest one's life in themselves and not in God. As we think about our own life, we realize that our life is about more than possessions. It's about how we relate with God. So when we choose to spend our lives on ourselves, we're like that rich fool. We're being foolish. But when we choose to invest our lives in God, we're being wise. So the question for us today is, have I invested my life in God? Have I given my life to God? For those of us that have made that decision, we still struggle. And so maybe today the question is, how am I doing at investing my life in God today? And regardless of how we answer that question, we can always ask the question, how can I invest my life in God moving forward? We all can make that decision right now. From this parable, the wise thing to do is to invest our life in God. Thanks.